The room felt colder than it should have. Senate hearing room, two sects known for dry debates and overused microphones, had never been more alive with cameras, journalists, and attention you could slice with a gavel. Every senator sat in position back, straight faces arranged like poker players. But all eyes were locked on one man, Senator J.D. Vance. He leaned forward, fingers tapping the oak desk in a rhythm he had likely practiced. His tone was measured, his words polished, his smile controlled, but his message, it was raw, ruthless, and deliberate. Low-income housing breeds failure, he said. 6 words that cracked through decades of pain, struggle, and quiet survival like a whip against the floor. He didn't say poverty. He didn't say economic crisis. He said failure. He labeled entire zip codes as rot, entire families as burdens. He called generations of effort a disease that needed clearing. Behind him, the Republican aides began to clap, one by one, then faster. A chorus of expensive suits, crisp ties, and cold palms meeting with approval. Applause in marble. Cameras flashed. News anchors scribbled. Fox News chyron flared red. Vance, clear out the slums. Save America. And Vance smiled. That kind of smile only a man makes when he thinks the room belongs to him, when he thinks no one will dare challenge the script, when he forgets truth has a heartbeat too. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. She didn't roll her eyes or raise her voice like the headlines would be loved her to. She simply looked up, her eyes locked on J.D. Vance, not with rage, not even with disgust, but with something colder. Clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't react, it calculates. While the room echoed with applause, Jasmine stayed perfectly still. Not frozen, but controlled. Her aide Marcus leaned in slightly, whispering just one line. He just handed you the match. She didn't speak. She just tapped the edge of her pen 4 times. Slowly. That was her signal. From across the chamber, one of her interns stood up quietly and walked out. Another opened a secure laptop. Something had been set in motion. Because Jasmine knew some battles aren't fought with microphones. They begin with silence and end with the truth. The scrape of a metal chair echoed through the hearing room. Everyone turned. A girl no taller than 5'3" stood slowly, hands trembling, just slightly as she clutched a folded sheet of paper to her chest. Her shoes were worn, her school uniform faded, and over it all was a second-hand green jacket zipped up tight like armor. She didn't look at J.D. Vance. She looked straight into camera 4, the one feeding out to 13.7 million homes. Her voice when it came wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a scalpel. If they tear down my home before July, I'll have nowhere to sleep. That was it. 9 seconds. 9 seconds that tore through every policy memo, every fake statistic, every cold headline calling her community disposable. 9 seconds where power didn't speak, it stared. The room held its breath. And for the first time that day, so did America. The moment her fingers unfolded that piece of paper, the entire room shifted. Ellie Harper held the eviction notice like it was a live wire. Red stamp, final date, her name, her mother's. Building 7B marked for demolition. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just held the truth up for the world to see. This notice came last week. If they tear it down, I won't have anywhere to sleep before Yale. J.D. Vance blinked, but he didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. He just sat, still, staring. For the first time that day, his silence wasn't strategy. It was shock. Across the room, producers in media booths whispered into headsets. Camera 4 tight shot on the girl. Zoom in, hold, don't cut. And slowly America leaned forward. Because policy was no longer abstract. It had a name, a face, a voice in a green jacket, and now it had an eviction date. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply walked to the podium holding a printed copy of Ellie's eviction notice in one hand and a highlighter in the other. Before you read this, she said calmly, please note the signature at the bottom. The committee members leaned in. Senator Booker squinted. Senator Lee raised an eyebrow. There it was, clear as day. Signature D. James Bowman, date 6 weeks ago. Jasmine circled it once, then held up a second page. And here's the city's first official safety inspection, dated 4 weeks ago. She let the silence hang. So the building was declared uninhabitable, after the eviction was already signed. How does that work, Senator Vance? All eyes turned. Vance shifted slightly in his chair. His fingers tapped the desk, but not rhythmically this time. There was a pause, a crack in the armor. Jasmine pressed on. One more thing, the name D. James Bowman doesn't appear on any official voter rolls, but it does appear on campaign finance documents and zoning memos and development contracts, which makes it not just suspicious. She stepped closer to the mic, but a cover-up. The room didn't breathe. Senator Vance shifted in his seat again, but this time it wasn't discomfort. It was fear. Jasmine Crockett clicked her remote. A screen behind her lit up D. James Bowman, Ohio Business Registry, an official PDF, a full legal name history, and right there in black and white, J.D. Vance, formerly known as D. James Bowman. Name change filed September 19, 2006. The room cracked open. Gasps, staffers whispering, reporters typing furiously. Senator Booker sat back slowly, eyes wide. You used a previous legal name to sign off on the destruction of 14 low-income communities. Jasmine asked, her voice steady. 14 communities. Displaced. Under a name you thought no one would trace. C-SPAN's live caption flickered. Twitter exploded. The hashtag #BowmanGate appeared within seconds. Vance's face flushed, but Jasmine wasn't done. You thought you buried that name. You thought it was dead and gone. But Mr. Bowman, the past doesn't stay buried when children freeze to death because of your signature. That sentence didn't just sting, it shattered the hearing room. The courtroom lights dimmed as Jasmine pressed play. Apartment 314, 2:37 a.m. Grainy black and white footage flickered across the screen. A man in a reflective vest crept down the hallway. He wasn't a pest inspector, not a health official. He was holding a red spray can, and one by one he marked the doors. A giant red X. Not with tape, not with chalk, with permanent paint. Apartment 314, 316, 319. No tenants were notified, no violations were found, but the pattern was chilling. Every marked unit belonged to a Black or Latino family. Jasmine paused the video. That, she said, is how they chose who to erase. The room was silent. Even J.D. Vance didn't blink. Pause. Jasmine zoomed in on the footage frame by frame. The man in the reflective vest, the one with the red spray can. He wasn't wearing a city badge. He wasn't on any payroll. He was a fake inspector, spraying fake evidence of rat infestations, submitting fake reports to the housing board. But the detail that broke the room, a button on his chest, blue, bold, Vance 2028 in white letters. His campaign button. He wasn't just an actor in a scheme. He was a foot soldier in a political war. Jasmine stared at the screen. This isn't about pests, she said. It's about power. And who gets to live where? This wasn't just one eviction. It was an orchestrated operation. Jasmine's team pulled the receipts, audio recordings, phone calls between local officials and lobbyists. Grant applications all rubber-stamped in under 48 hours. Maps color-coded to remove 14 housing projects in minority areas. Then came the money trail. $71 million in federal redevelopment grants. Not to public agencies, not to nonprofits, but to private firms, many with direct financial ties to Vance's 2028 campaign. One company's CEO donated $400,000 2 days before receiving a $6.2 million contract. Another listed campaign consulting under housing demolition expenses. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The facts screamed loud enough. This wasn't neglect, she said. It was a business plan. They didn't even call her. Jasmine received the envelope 2 days after her press briefing. It came from the local police department. No headline, no warning, just a brown folder and a note. We thought you should see this. Inside was a final report. A 7-year-old boy, Jamal Turner, was found in the backseat of a car, frozen solid, clutching an empty water bottle. Next to him, 3 denied heating applications, stamped, dated, filed. Each one marked non-essential unit, scheduled for demolition. The boy's mother had called 911 3 times. She'd waited in a blanket, arms wrapped around her son, but no help ever came. The heater had been shut off, the apartment was unlivable, and the temporary shelter list was at capacity. Jasmine read the report in silence, then turned to the camera. He died because someone put a stamp on a piece of paper. At first glance, it looked like a mistake. Every rejected heating request, every eviction notice, every demolition order from the past 14 months, all stamped with the same phrase, redevelopment zone. No resettlement required. It sounded clinical, bureaucratic, clean, but the consequences were fatal. Jasmine's legal team followed the trail. Every document led to a single approving signature, D. James Bowman, an unfamiliar name to the public. But to anyone who had ever combed through Ohio legal archives, it rang a bell. That was J.D. Vance's former legal name, back when he practiced law, back when he filed corporate paperwork, back before politics gave him something to hide. Jasmine held the folder up. These decisions weren't mistakes. They were signed by a man who thought no one would look too closely. The folder slipped from Jasmine's hands and landed on the table with a dull thud. She had read the suicide note from Ellie's father 3 times already, and still her hands trembled. The man had been a decorated firefighter. He wasn't asking for charity. He was asking for heat for his daughter. He was asking not to freeze in the country he risked his life for. And the system said no. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Because of redevelopment plans that had no faces, no names, no heart. The silence in the committee room was thick. No more clapping, no smug smiles, just stillness. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't about policy. This wasn't about party lines. This was about who gets to survive and who gets erased. Jasmine stood up. This is not politics anymore. This is life. And if you think I'm going to sit here and protect your comfort over their survival, you're damn wrong. Her voice didn't crack. It cut straight into the conscience of the room. We will not be silent. We will blow this wide open. Ellie hadn't been back to the apartment since the eviction notice came, but something pulled her back. She stepped over the peeling linoleum, the silence thick like smoke. Everything smelled like dust and absence. But when she passed the rusted furnace by the kitchen wall, she paused. There, taped behind it, was an envelope. It had yellowed edges. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her father's, inside a single-page letter. The date in the corner made her knees buckle. February 17, the day they cut our heat. His words weren't angry. They were tired. He wrote about the 3 denied requests for heating assistance. He wrote about Ellie shivering in her sleep, too proud to complain, and then he mentioned it. They're demolishing the block. That's why they're letting us freeze. I've seen the papers. They're signed by someone named D. James Bowman. She sat down on the dusty floor, letter trembling in her hands. It was no longer just a theory. It was evidence. A father, a veteran, a man who died believing no one would ever hear his truth. But now someone had. Jasmine sat in the quiet of her office, the heater humming faintly behind her. Ellie's letter lay open on her desk, its edges still dusty, her father's handwriting faded but fierce. Next to it was a manila folder. Inside, official city documents, dates, signatures, internal memos. She flipped to the page that mattered most. February 15th, initiate Phase 1, heat suspension in pre-cleared units. Signed, D. James Bowman. 2 days later, Ellie's father recorded the cold. The exact same day the neighborhood lost power. No more theory, no more what-ifs. Vance knew. He didn't just ignore it. He planned it. This wasn't administrative error. This was intentional. 14 neighborhoods, hundreds of families. 7 recorded hypothermia cases and 1 death. She stared at the page, her fist tightening. This wasn't about laws anymore. This was about lives, and now they had evidence the whole world could see. It was 10:43 a.m. inside the Senate chamber. Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium holding a document stamped with the name D. James Bowman. Her voice rang steady at first, citing housing codes violations and planned demolitions. Then suddenly a soft pop. The mic went dead. For a moment there was silence, then murmurs, then smirks from across the aisle. Technical issue, someone mumbled. J.D. Vance didn't even hide his grin. But Jasmine didn't move. She placed the paper flat on the podium and raised her voice. You can silence my mic, but not my message. You can mute me, but not the truth. She spoke louder now, not yelling, but commanding. One by one, staffers, aides, and even a few senators leaned in to hear her words. This isn't about politics. This is about people. This is about a girl in a green jacket whose father died, whose heat was cut by a signature J.D. Vance tried to hide. A security guard approached, hesitated, then stopped. Even he knew interrupting now would be suicide, political and moral. The room was frozen, and Jasmine, without a microphone, was louder than any amplified voice in Washington. It was still dark when the bulldozer arrived. 6:12 a.m., no prior notice, no eviction officer, no press. Just the roar of diesel engines and the flashing red light of demolition crews. Apartment 3B, Ellie's home, still had the lights off. Inside, she was asleep next to her mother on their old futon. The first noise was a loud clang, the sound of metal jaws biting into a corner of the adjacent building. Neighbors screamed. Someone ran outside barefoot. Ellie's mother shot up, grabbed her coat, and yanked open the door. "What are you doing? There's still people inside." A man in a neon vest turned confused. "We're just following orders. Signed paperwork. Building 3 is condemned." But that wasn't true, not yet. The date was 4 days earlier than scheduled. They were trying to erase the evidence before the cameras returned. And the worst part, there were no cameras this time. No journalists, no politicians. Only Ellie and the sound of her life crumbling. Ellie didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't run. At exactly 6:19 a.m., she stepped outside in her oversized green jacket, the same one she wore when testifying before Congress. She walked past the crowd, past the chaos, past the wreckage of the building next door, and sat right on the concrete steps of her apartment, the next one scheduled for demolition. No protest sign, no words, just her. Thin arms wrapped around her knees, eyes wide open but expressionless, facing the bulldozer head on. The operator hesitated. Then someone radioed, "Hold. We've got a kid in the path." Within minutes, a murmur rippled through the street. Phones came out, one live stream, then 2, then 5 million viewers across platforms, and then she wasn't alone anymore. From the end of the block, Jasmine Crockett appeared, dressed in dark gray heels, clicking the pavement. She didn't bring security. She didn't bring a microphone. She simply walked up the steps, sat down beside Ellie, and said nothing. For the next 14 minutes, America held its breath. No speeches, no chants, just 2 women, one young, one fierce, together facing the machine. It started with a 14-year-old. His name was Jalen. He lived 3 floors above Ellie. Woken by the sound of construction and the strange silence that followed, he grabbed his phone, opened TikTok, and hit go live. At first, only 5 people watched. Then someone recognized the green jacket. Then another whispered, "That's the girl from Congress." Within 15 minutes, the live stream had 1.2 million viewers. Within 30, over 8 million. CNN tried to cut in. Fox called it a stunt, but neither could stop what had begun. Across the country, people pulled over on highways to tune in. Teachers stopped class. A church paused Sunday service. Then the hashtag appeared. Shad, don't move Ellie. It trended within 7 minutes. Top 1 in the U.S. within 15. And on the Senate floor, a stunned intern whispered into her senior aide's ear, "Sir, she's live. The whole country's watching." No one moved. Not the demolition crew, not the media. Only Jasmine's hand gently resting on Ellie's back, reminding her she wasn't alone. On the Senate floor, Jasmine Crockett stood tall not with anger, but with purpose. She held up the document, the Harper Amendment. A single line highlighted in yellow, "No demolition of federally funded housing shall proceed without a public vote by affected local residents." There was no applause. Not yet. Because what followed was not politics. It was truth wrapped in legal language, delivered by a woman who had watched a 17-year-old face down a bulldozer in a green jacket and refused to move. Jasmine read aloud stories of children frozen in cars, of parents whose only crime was being poor, of neighborhoods erased without consent. Then she said this amendment is not about saving buildings. It's about saving dignity. In a vote streamed live to millions, the Senate passed it 63-37. No more silent demolitions, no more hidden signatures. No more J.D. Vances hiding behind fake names. For Ellie Harper, it was more than a law. It was her voice etched into American history. The Senate chamber was silent. All cameras were rolling. J.D. Vance raised his right hand. He was under oath. The question was direct from a junior senator from Illinois. Do you believe there are communities in America that are not worth saving? He paused, then smiled, and spoke 6 words that would end his political life. Some places just need to be erased. No spin, no context, no mercy. The hearing room erupted not in sound, but in stillness. Even his aides looked away. On Twitter, it took 19 seconds. The clips spread like wildfire. 3 hours later, the White House issued a statement. 12 hours later, major donors pulled out. By morning, headlines read, "Senator Vance, the sentence that cost him everything," and Ellie Harper. She watched from her apartment, still standing wrapped in the same green jacket. Not angry, not triumphant, just quiet, because the war wasn't over. But the first victory had been won. They used to say nothing important comes from 45217. That was Ellie's zip code, just another forgotten stretch of Cincinnati where the mail rarely brought anything good and bulldozers didn't need permission. But that changed because a girl in a green jacket refused to move, because she spoke only one sentence and shook the country with it, because the Harper Amendment passed and for the first time in decades, power had to listen to the people it tried to erase. Schools wrote about her, families named their daughters after her, and in a Senate hallway, one plaque quietly appeared beside a framed copy of the amendment: never underestimate the voice of someone they tried to silence. Ellie didn't become a senator. She didn't want fame. She went back to school, wore that same jacket, and walked past the now empty lot where her home once stood. But she was no longer invisible. She was a symbol. Sometimes the smallest voice can spark the loudest change. Ellie Harper didn't have power, money, or a title. She had only her truth and the courage to stand still when the world told her to move. In a society that often ignores the poor, the unheard, and the unseen, this story reminds us every voice matters, especially the ones they try hardest to silence. Change doesn't always begin in a courtroom or at the ballot box. Sometimes it starts with a girl in a green jacket refusing to be erased. If this story moved you, if you believe in justice, truth, and the power of one voice, don't just scroll away. Hit subscribe, share this video, and join a community that fights for the stories they don't want you to hear. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions start with just one click.